Welcome to Stories Junction. Let's begin today's story. My name is Ethan, and I want to start with a question. Have you ever met someone who felt like your entire future, only to watch them shatter that dream with betrayal? That's my story. Before my wife, Lila, even hinted at wanting an open marriage, her polished excuse for what she was already doing, I knew the truth. She was unfaithful. Our marriage was crumbling beyond repair, and I faced one clear choice: end it. To understand how we reached this point, though, you need the full story from the very beginning. It all started with a photo. A friend, Sarah, posted a picture of herself with Lila on social media. It was just a candid shot, but Lila's presence in it stopped me cold. Something about her smile, maybe, or the way she carried herself, drew me in. I hounded Sarah for days, begging her to introduce us. She brushed it off at first, teasing me, but I was relentless. Finally, she caved and arranged a blind date. I had no idea what to expect that evening in Portland. When Lila walked into the cafe, she was even more striking in person. We clicked instantly. Conversation flowed effortlessly, like we'd known each other forever. There was this spark, a shared moment that felt like fate. By the end of the night, I was certain she was what I'd been searching for. We exchanged numbers, and from there it was a whirlwind: texts, late-night calls, and dates that stretched into the early hours. Lila wasn't just beautiful. She was magnetic. Our talks revealed shared values, dreams of building a life together, and an emotional connection that felt rare. Within months, we were exclusive. After a year of dating, we moved in together into a cozy apartment overlooking the Willamette River. It felt natural. We were already inseparable. Living together brought us closer, despite the occasional hiccup every couple faces. 2 years later, I proposed under a starlit sky during a weekend trip to the coast. She said yes, and I was convinced we were forever. But looking back, I see the cracks I ignored. About 6 months before the proposal, Lila started to change. She grew distant, physically present but emotionally elsewhere. The warmth she once radiated faded. I sensed she was slipping away, but I didn't confront it. Instead, I made a terrible mistake. I thought a ring would fix everything. I believed proposing would prove my love and pull her back. I was wrong. You can't mend a fractured bond by forcing it together. It's like pressing broken glass and hoping it holds. It doesn't. Right after the wedding, things briefly improved. Lila seemed like her old self, affectionate, engaged. For a moment, I thought we'd made it through the storm, but it was fleeting. Soon, she withdrew again, this time more blatantly. When I asked if something was wrong, she'd brush me off or snap, saying I was overthinking. If I questioned her spending, new clothes, dinners out, she'd lash out, saying, "This is why I don't tell you anything." I let it slide to keep the peace, but the tension grew. Then came the inconsistencies. Lila's stories about her day didn't add up. She'd mentioned staying late at her marketing firm in downtown Portland for a client pitch, but later, the story would shift. Maybe it was drinks with colleagues to celebrate a campaign. Small details changed each time she retold it. Once, she said a meeting ran late because her boss was unprepared. Another time, it was a team happy hour. I wanted to trust her, so I didn't push. But the discrepancies piled up. When I gently pointed them out, she'd get defensive, turning it back on me like I was paranoid. I backed off, telling myself it wasn't worth a fight. But her behavior escalated. Late nights became frequent. She'd claim work or drinks with friends, always with a new excuse. Sometimes she'd come home smelling faintly of wine, her explanations vague. I didn't want to be the jealous husband, so I gave her space, convincing myself it was normal. The final straw was our intimacy, or lack of it. When I reached for her, she'd pull away, citing stress or exhaustion. If I tried to talk, she'd flip it, making me feel like I was the problem. I'd end up apologizing for even bringing it up. Our home became a minefield. One wrong word, and she'd storm off, saying she needed space. I was losing her, and I didn't know how to stop it. What happens when the person you love becomes a stranger? How do you hold on when the truth is staring you in the face? Stick with me to find out what I discovered, and the choice that changed everything. The distance between Lila and me grew into a chasm. and I was still clinging to the hope that I could bridge it. But hope can blind you, and I was about to learn just how far things had gone. It was a Thursday evening in late fall, and I was finishing up at my office in Portland's Pearl District. Lila called, her voice casual, saying she was stuck at work on a last-minute presentation for a big client. It wasn't unusual. She'd used the work excuse plenty of times before. I didn't question it. Instead, I decided to do something kind, something to show I still cared despite the strain. There was this little bakery near her office, a place she loved for their lavender scones. I thought I'd surprise her with a few, maybe brighten her night. Even with all the red flags, her distance, the vague, new inconsistencies, the late nights, I still wanted to believe we could fix this. I pulled into the parking lot of her office building, scones in hand, and headed to the lobby. The place was quiet, just a security guard scrolling on his phone. I asked him to buzz Lila's floor so I could drop off the food. He frowned, confused. "Most people left an hour ago," he said. "I don't think anyone's up there." His words hit like a punch. I thanked him, walked back to my car, and sat there, the paper bag crinkling in my lap. My gut twisted. I called Lila, keeping my voice steady, and made up some excuse about needing a file from her desk. Then, casually I asked, "Still at the office?" She didn't hesitate. "Yeah, just wrapping up. Should be done soon." Her tone was so smooth, so practiced, it chilled me. We hung up, and I sat in silence, my mind racing. Then I remembered something. A few months back, we'd put air tags on our keychains after I kept misplacing mine. On a hunch, I opened the app and checked her car's location. It wasn't at her office. It was at a boutique hotel in Northwest Portland, about 10 minutes away. My heart pounded, but I didn't hesitate. I drove straight there, the city lights blurring past. When I pulled into the hotel lot, I saw her car parked neatly under a street lamp. That was it. No work emergency, no client pitch. Just Lila, somewhere she wasn't supposed to be, with someone she shouldn't be with. I didn't go inside. I didn't need to. The sight of her car was enough to shatter the last thread of denial I'd been clinging to. I drove home in a daze, the scones forgotten on the passenger seat. My mind was a tug of war. Part of me wanted to barge in, demand answers, watch her squirm. But the louder part knew it was pointless. She'd lied to deflect, make me feel like the bad guy. I'd heard it all before. By the time I got home, I made up my mind. I wasn't going to confront her. I was going to end it. When Lila walked through the door that night, she tossed her bag on the counter and launched into a story about how her team had to scramble for some big deadline. She threw in names, colleagues I vaguely knew, spinning a web of details. I stood there, leaning against the kitchen counter, watching her lie to my face without a flicker of guilt. It was almost impressive how effortlessly she did it. I didn't interrupt, didn't ask questions. I just let her talk, her words washing over me like background noise. In that moment, I saw her clearly. There was nothing left of the woman I'd fallen for. Our marriage was dead, and she didn't even realize it. The next morning, I woke up with a clarity I hadn't felt in months. I started moving pieces into place, quietly, methodically. First, I contacted a financial advisor and began shifting our savings, money we'd set aside for a house, into my control. I converted it into gold and silver, arranging for storage in a secure vault overseas, far from Lila's reach or any court's jurisdiction. It took days of careful coordination, but I cover my tracks. Next, I hired a divorce attorney, one recommended by a colleague who'd been through a messy split. I laid out everything. Lila's behavior, the hotel, my suspicions, and told him I wanted the papers ready as soon as possible. I wasn't wasting any more time. At home, I changed too. I stopped pretending. If Lila stayed out late, I didn't care. I started leaving the house myself, not bothering to say where I was going. When she came home, I didn't ask about her day or her friends. I became a ghost in my own home, polite but unreachable. I could see it unnerved her. Sometimes, she'd shoot me a puzzled look, like she was trying to figure out why I wasn't chasing her anymore. But she didn't ask, and I didn't offer. The thought of her with someone else made my skin crawl. She wasn't my Lila anymore. She hadn't been for a long time. Maybe she never was. The realization stung, but it also freed me. I was done begging for scraps of her affection, done apologizing for her lies. I was ready to walk away, but I needed to do it right, clean, final, no room for her to claw her way back. What would you do when the truth stares you in the face? Would you fight for answers or start planning your exit? The next move I made changed everything. Stay tuned to see how it unfolded. The air in our Portland apartment had turned stale, heavy with unspoken truths. I was done playing the devoted husband, waiting for Lila to magically become the woman I thought I'd married. My days were consumed with quiet preparation, securing finances, consulting my attorney, and mentally detaching from the life we'd built. I kept up appearances just enough to avoid tipping her off, but inside I was already gone. Lila, though, seemed oblivious, carrying on with her late nights and flimsy excuses like nothing had changed. But something was brewing, and it wouldn't be long before the facade cracked. About a month into my silent withdrawal, Lila finally noticed the shift. I'd stopped asking where she'd been, stopped trying to spark conversations, stopped caring about her half-hearted explanations. My indifference was a mirror, and she didn't like what she saw. One rainy evening, as I sat on the couch scrolling through emails, she stood in the doorway, arms crossed, and said, "Ethan, can we talk?" Her tone was softer than usual, almost cautious. I nodded, more curious than invested, and followed her to the dining table. She sat across from me, fidgeting with her coffee mug, and launched into a speech she'd clearly rehearsed. "I've been thinking about us," she started, her eyes darting to the table. "Relationships evolve, you know? Maybe we're stuck in this old-school idea of marriage. I love you, Ethan, but what if exploring other people could make us stronger?" She leaned forward, like she was pitching a brilliant idea, her face a mix of hope and calculation. I almost laughed, not because it was funny, but because it was so transparent. This wasn't about modern relationships or saving us. It was her trying to legitimize what she'd already done. Guilt dripped from every word, and I saw it for what it was, a preemptive strike to ease her conscience. I let her words hang in the air, watching her squirm under my silence. Then, leaning back in my chair, I looked her square in the eyes and said, "We don't need an open marriage, Lila. This marriage is over. You're free to be with whoever you've been sneaking around with." Her face froze like a deer caught in headlights. For a split second, I saw panic flicker in her eyes, but she recovered quickly. "What are you talking about?" she said, her voice rising. "You're blowing this out of proportion. I'm just trying to have an honest conversation." She leaned into confusion, her go-to tactic, acting like I'd misread the situation. It was textbook gaslighting, and I wasn't falling for it. I stayed calm, my voice low but firm. "I know about the hotel, Lila. I've known for a while. It doesn't matter anymore. The divorce papers are already in motion. We're done." I laid out her options. She could start packing, or I would. Either way, this was the end. Her mouth opened, then closed, like she was scrambling for a comeback, but found nothing. For once, her lies had nowhere to land. I didn't wait for her to regroup. I stood, grabbed my jacket, and walked out into the drizzle, leaving her to sit with the truth. The next day, Lila tried to rewrite the narrative. She cornered me in the kitchen, her eyes red and puffy, voice trembling. "Ethan, you're wrong about this," she said, clutching her phone like a lifeline. "There's no one else. You're jumping to conclusions. We can fix this if you just listen." Her tears looked real, but I'd seen this performance before. Every time I got too close to the truth, she'd pivot to playing the victim. It hurt, watching her try to manipulate me even now, but I didn't engage. I just nodded and said, "There's nothing to fix. My lawyer will handle the rest." Then I walked away. From that point on, I made it my mission to avoid her. I stayed late at work, crashed at a friend's place some nights, anything to keep distance. Lila didn't stop trying, though. She'd send texts, some pleading, some accusatory, like I was the one tearing us apart. "I don't understand why you're doing this," one read. "We could still make it work." Another time, she left a voicemail, her voice soft and teary, asking if we could meet for coffee just to talk. I didn't respond. Every word felt like a hook, trying to drag me back in her chaos. My attorney was moving fast. The divorce papers were nearly ready, and I'd already started looking at apartments across town. The plan was simple. Serve the papers, let Lila move out, and walk away clean. But I knew she wouldn't make it easy. She was still in the apartment, acting like if she stayed long enough, I'd cave. I wasn't playing that game. If she wouldn't leave, I would. I started packing essentials, clothes, documents, a few sentimental things, preparing to start over. Every step I took toward freedom felt like shedding a weight, but it wasn't painless. Late at night, when the city was quiet, I'd replay the good moments. Our first date, the way she laughed on that coastal trip, the day she said yes. Had it all been a lie? Or had something changed her? Those questions haunted me, but I couldn't let them pull me back. I was choosing myself, maybe for the first time. What happens when the person you loved becomes your greatest lesson? Will Lila finally face the truth, or keep fighting to rewrite it? Stay with me to see how the endgame unfolds. The Portland rain hadn't let up, mirroring the storm of my life. I was done waiting for Lila to face reality. My attorney had the divorce papers nearly finalized, and I'd secured a small apartment across town, a quiet studio near Forest Park where I could start rebuilding. I'd packed my essentials, leaving behind anything tied to our shared life. The apartment we'd once filled with dreams felt like a hollow shell now, and I couldn't stay another night under the same roof as her lies. Lila, though, clung to the idea that she could still sway me, her desperation growing as my resolve hardened. She refused to move out, acting like her presence would wear me down. Every day, she'd try new tactics, teary apologies one moment, indignant accusations the next. One evening, as I packed a final box, she stood in the doorway, voice shaking. "Ethan, you're throwing everything away over a misunderstanding," she said, her eyes wide with feigned innocence. "I never cheated. You're letting your paranoia ruin us." It was almost convincing, but I knew better. Her words were a last-ditch effort to rewrite the story, and I wasn't her audience anymore. "Lila, I'm not debating this," I said, taping the box shut. "The papers are coming. You could talk to my lawyer." Her face crumpled, but I didn't stick around to watch the performance. I grabbed my keys and left, the door clicking shut behind me. That night, I moved into the studio, the bare walls and single mattress a stark contrast to the life I'd imagined with her. It wasn't much, but it was mine, a clean slate. Lila didn't stop trying to pull me back. My phone buzzed with texts at all hours. Some were long, rambling pleas. "I know I messed up, but we can go to counseling. I'll change." Others were sharp, blaming me. "You're so quick to give up. I thought you loved me." Late one night, she left a voicemail, her voice slurring slightly, asking why I wouldn't just meet her halfway. I didn't reply. Every message was a trap, designed to guilt me into second-guessing myself. I forwarded everything to my attorney and blocked her number for texts and calls, limiting contact to email for logistics only. The divorce process was slow but steady. My lawyer was meticulous, ensuring every detail was airtight. We'd split assets cleanly. Our savings were already out of her reach, safely stored as gold and silver in an overseas vault. Lila didn't know about that yet, and I wasn't about to tip her off. The apartment lease was in both our names, but I'd already notified the landlord I was leaving. If she wanted to stay, she'd have to cover it herself. I was cutting every tie, step by deliberate step. Living alone brought clarity, but also forced me to face the pain I'd been outrunning. In the quiet of my studio, memories crept in. Lila's laugh during our first hike in the Columbia Gorge, the way she'd curl into me on lazy Sundays. I'd loved her fiercely, but that love had blinded me to her flaws. I'd ignored the warning signs, thinking devotion could fix what was already broken. Now, I saw it clearly. You can't force someone to be loyal, no matter how much you give. I started rebuilding piece by piece. I reconnected with friends I'd neglected, spent evenings running trails in Forest Park, and threw myself into work. But Lila's shadow lingered. One day, my attorney called with an update. Lila was contesting the divorce, claiming we could reconcile. It was a delay tactic, not a surprise, but it stung. She was fighting not for us, but for control. My lawyer assured me it wouldn't change the outcome. It just meant more time. I told him to push forward, no matter what she threw at us. A week later, I got an email from her, Not about the divorce, but a long, emotional ramble. She wrote about her early days, how she felt so safe with me, how she didn't know how things got so messed up. She begged for one last conversation, for closure. I read it once, then forwarded it to my lawyer without replying. Closure wasn't something she could give me. I had to find it myself. Her words were just another hook, and I wasn't biting. As the divorce dragged on, I started to feel the weight of what I'd lost. Not just Lila, but the version of myself who believed in forever. I've been naive, thinking love alone could hold us together. Now, I was learning to trust my instincts, to value my own worth. It was a slow process, but every step away from her felt like reclaiming a piece of me. What happens when the person you trusted most fights to keep you in their web? Will Lila's tactics delay the inevitable? Or will Ethan finally break free? Keep reading to see how the story unfolds. The Portland skyline blurred outside my studio window as I stood at the edge of a new chapter. The divorce papers were finally ready, and my attorney had served them to Lila. I'd cut every tie, financial, emotional, physical, leaving nothing for her to hold over me. My new apartment, sparse but mine, was a sanctuary where I could breathe without the weight of her lies. Yet, even as I moved forward, Lila's attempts to pull me back grew more desperate, and the lessons of our unraveling marriage crystallized into truths I'd carry forever. Lila's reaction to the divorce papers was predictable. She didn't sign them. Instead, she doubled down, bombarding my attorney with requests for mediation and reconciliation talks. She claimed she wanted to save our marriage, but I saw through it. She was stalling, hoping to wear me down or dig into the assets I'd secured. My lawyer was unfazed, warning me she might drag things out, but assuring me her tactics wouldn't change the outcome. The savings I converted to gold, and silver remained safely stored overseas, untouchable. I planned too carefully for her to unravel it. Her emails kept coming, each one a mix of nostalgia and manipulation. One night, she wrote a novella-length message, recounting our happiest moments, our rainy walks along the Willamette, the night I proposed on the coast. "I know I hurt you," she wrote, "but I'm not the person you think. Let's just talk, Ethan. One last time." I didn't respond. Her words stirred memories, but they also reminded me of her betrayal. I forwarded the email to my lawyer and deleted it, refusing to let her rewrite our ending. I leaned into my new life. I started hiking again, the trails of Forest Park becoming my refuge. Friends rallied around me, inviting me to dinners and game nights, slowly pulling me out of the isolation Lila's chaos had created. At work, I took on new projects, channeling my energy into something productive. But late at night, alone in my studio, I grappled with the deeper scars. I'd loved Lila with everything I had, and she'd chosen to break that trust. The question wasn't just how it happened, but why I'd ignored the signs for so long. Reflecting on it, I realized I'd been complicit in my own pain. I'd seen her distance, her lies, her late nights, but I made excuses thinking love meant enduring. I'd tiptoed around her moods, afraid to upset the fragile balance, losing myself in the process. That was my biggest mistake, not her betrayal, but my refusal to trust my instincts. I'd learned the hard way that love shouldn't feel like a tightrope. It should lift you, not leave you scrambling to hold on. The divorce proceedings crawled forward. Lila's resistance slowed things, but my attorney kept the pressure on. One day, he called with news. Lila had finally agreed to sign, likely realizing she had no leverage. The terms were clear: minimal alimony, no claim to my secured assets, and the apartment lease was hers to deal with. It was over. When I heard the news, I didn't feel triumph, just relief. A chapter I'd clung to for too long was closing. I never saw Lila again after I moved out. Our only contact was through lawyers, and even that ended with the signed papers. I heard through a mutual friend that she'd moved to Seattle, maybe chasing a fresh start or the person she'd been with at that hotel. I didn't care enough to ask. She was a stranger now, a lesson wrapped in memories I'd rather forget. Looking back, I've learned that trust is a fragile thing. Once broken, it's never quite whole again. You can't force loyalty or glue a shattered bond back together with hope. The moment someone shows you who they are, believe them. I wish I'd walked away sooner, respected myself enough to demand honesty from the start. But regrets don't change the past. They just shape how you move forward. If there's one thing I want you to take from this, it's this. Love should never feel like survival. If you're constantly anxious, unheard, or questioning your worth, that's not a relationship. It's a cage. You deserve better. You deserve to thrive, to be valued, to feel safe. Don't let anyone convince you that asking for respect is too much. It's the bare minimum. So, I ask you, what would you have done in my shoes? Would you have confronted her earlier, tried to salvage things, or walked away like I did? If you've been through something like this, or know someone who has, share your thoughts. Sometimes, hearing you're not alone is the first step toward choosing yourself. And if my story resonates, pass it on. It might just help someone find the strength to step into their own freedom.